Ladies and gentlemen, this is Scott Pollock, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Welcome to another edition of the Goldwater Report. Thanks again for tuning us in, ladies and gentlemen. We appreciate it. If you can think about it, go over to the Critical Post Chicago head page and click on an ad of your choice to support us. Google will pay us, and it costs you absolutely nothing. There's a new edition of the Bittersweet Records Radio Hour also on the head page of the Critical Post. If you scroll down a bit over there on the left side of your screens, you can access and download it there for free, or go over to bittersweetrecords.net. We hope you enjoy the latest episode and vibes emanating from Chicago, the capital of the Midwest Coast. Ladies and gentlemen, we will have an opinion about the UK's exit referendum from the European Union to take place at the end of June, along with an opinion about tariffs in our next Goldwater report, and a new Critical Post Chicago report of things we find of high relevance and things that may have gone unnoticed by this distinguished audience. Stay tuned for all of that. Ladies and gentlemen, it is our fervent hope that those of you who subscribe to this YouTube broadcast channel, that it is something you trust as having good judgment about what we choose to report from this anchor desk as being the most relevant to your lives, and that you view this company as a news reporting agency that has the requisite integrity to earn your respect and to reinvigorate what has been lost, that being an informed and correctly formatted news reporting press organization which shuns the current aberrations of popular culture broadcast journalism. In other words, the aim of the Critical Post is to stand up a properly objective news reporting agency free from journalism and partisan political journalism, and to be as objective and as scientific as possible. We'll remind our audience, the bias of this news desk is the proper advocacy of primary private property rights, meaning your body and labor, free from partisan factions and the people's right to the fruits of their labor, free from government taxation, coercion by unrepresented taxation by and through the Congress as it sits today, and the IRS. Another bias this anchor desk employs in judging its own objective standards is the reporting of the malfeasance being practiced by the court system in America. Anyone with correct knowledge who is paying attention knows the country can't function with a court system that is mostly corrupt and highly unaffordable. We will remind the good folks here in America, the lawyer class in this country mostly advocated by the American Bar Association and each respective state bar association is not being schooled on how to fight the current system. Rather, their education and degrees from the nation's universities are biased in knowledge that supports the corrupt system already in progress and in place, and at too great a cost for the American public to access by the use of exorbitant fees. Likewise, the courts themselves, as we have demonstrated with reports in the past, like the one about Carol Keene and her being subjected in her particular community, are being used as cash registers for hidden trusts the public is unaware of, and that exists at every level of courts in the lower court system throughout the country, and we suspect perhaps the higher courts as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it is a well-known fact in some informed circles, the phrase conspiracy theory, or the plural form conspiracy theories, has been imbued into the consciences of populations throughout the world by the clandestine security and espionage services everywhere in every country, and especially by America's rogue agencies within the NSA and CIA, so as to keep the idea of credible investigative inferences off balance and to make the public wary of information with a default position as everything you read or hear is indeed highly suspect by any well-reasoned and objective news reporting operation such as the Critical Post as merely conjecture. This indeed is the fog of informational war. Recently, to provide you with a case to demonstrate this point and how it works, this anchorman had a conversation after dinner this past Easter with some close friends whom they thought were doing me a favor by telling me I sounded like, quote-unquote, a conspiracy theorist by saying to me, quote-unquote, dude, it doesn't work that way, dude. Little do they know that, in fact, to demonstrate a particular advisor to the Critical Post's assertions and concerns, we were contacted by something known as a cutout directly, which is a lawyer on private payroll to the CIA as an intercessor, and were advised of a lawsuit against the Critical Post to remove a piece of information from our publication regarding a known fraudster, one Lord Neil Benjamin Gibson. Now, I've seen in person some of the files from this particular consultant and advisor, and verified independently by other means, this advisor is who he says he is, knows what he says he knows, and the contact by this lawyer indeed graphically demonstrated the fact to this anchor desk. And I have a recording of the conversation. This anchor desk is here to assert, with a certain advisor as our lens, that semantical operations are indeed afoot everywhere, and that vast clandestine operation conspiracies do exist. The previous two instances of facts being mentioned here is two clear examples. Ladies and gentlemen, in order for the citizens of America and Britain to fully comprehend the information being made available by the entire worldwide socialist, fascist journalism megaplex owned and operated by the highly monetized interests in the world, whose ownership is concentrated within 6 or 7 international journalism corporations, along with the banks and their minions, it's necessary to at least keep in mind there are exactly 193 member states in the United Nations, which in turn implies there are 193 secret security apparati engaged in all the forces necessary to operate intelligence, defensive, offensive capabilities, espionage, blackmail, black market profiteering, and informational control systems acting upon each respective nation-state culture. Many techniques and linguistic technologies are being employed to keep populations in the dark. An advisor to this company in the recent past has given us a cursory education in these dark arts and the terms to understand what is known, in fact, as semantical operations. Recently, a cable news channel has been broadcasting a story about a Mexican cable channel staging a shot during a protest in Los Angeles outside of one of Mr. Trump's rallies, and caught in the act on camera by a separate camera crew from a different cable news channel, whose cameraman was asking the question, "Are you staging a shot? Are you staging a shot?" as if to imply that the reporting company of this event by their cameraman does not take part in the very same practice, and which is also not true. Though we suspect it and assert it, it cannot be confirmed or denied by this anchor desk. However, it is emblematic of a greater problem, blatant partisan dishonesty in the journalism channels devoid of any objective standards. As another example of these operations, we offer the following. Recently, Premier Networks Coast to Coast AM, known to us, though unofficially, a program imbued with the actions of taint and disrepresentation, Coast to Coast AM, owned by Premier Networks, along with its host, the Captain Kangaroo of the airwaves, George Noory, had as a guest disgraced CBS propagandist Dan Rather on the airwaves hawking his new book. CBS, of course, had to fire Rather after he was caught manufacturing a lie for a specific report some years ago. That particular instance was actually CBS getting their hands caught in a cookie jar, in the opinion of this anchor desk, through the vessel of correspondent Mr. Dan Rather. So they scapegoated Mr. Rather without admitting any complicity in the exercise. In the interview with Mr. Noory, Mr. Rather admitted that the news business is not about reporting any longer. There's no money being spent on investigative reporting, substituting the word journalism for the word reporting, which is linguistic repurposing and linguistic remodeling, because it doesn't pay the bills. So, what is being reported on every channel is more entertainment than news. It's agendized. It's about making money with compromised, sly partisan agenda linguistic modeling and bad information lacking any news reporting activity. May the American public remember the mostly unknown quote by the late Walter Cronkite, the man whose reputation built CBS's news reporting integrity in the early days of broadcast television. Quote, "I am worried about the encroachment of entertainment upon the news," unquote. We reported earlier, Mr. Noory also had Rather's contemporary, formerly the ABC News Desk anchor and producer for Nightline, Ted Koppel, another propagandist, hawking a book about the nation's electrical grid, which sought to instill fear or awareness, depending on one's perspective, about a possible nationwide blackout as a result of an electromagnetic pulse, which, some have said on Noory's show, could be triggered by a nuclear explosion above the skies of North America. Coast to Coast has many advertisers that sell prepper and survival gear, and one might want to know, is there any connection in this? Coast to Coast AM, famous as being an official channel to spread UFO speculations and alleged whistleblower information, is being continuously lauded by its guests on the air, all of whom are peddling their views towards various subjects along with their websites and books. Though a channel of taint, as being a pillar of integrity, but who was caught red-handed by this anchor desk with the aid of two important investigators, one already alluded to, one Mr. Paul Collin, and the lead man for the White Hats report in peddling a book and a story by UFO speculator David Wilcock, which in the end was a story that floated a complete fraud, and which upon hearing it on Noory's show convinced a woman to give up her life savings of over $300,000 to the person profiled in Wilcock's fantasy called financial tyranny. Though financial tyranny as a subject does exist, Wilcock pilfered the subject matter as a provocative title and helped perpetrate, as an unwitting dupe, possibly, a specific CIA plot that was put into the field, verified by Collin, part of which decimated a certain portion of high-ranking Patriot military personnel within the Pentagon. That occurred in 2012 and 2013, you will recall. Hundreds of generals and colonels in the Air Force were fired. It was Mr. Collin, an ex-CIA non-official cover operative, Department of Homeland Security, Immigration's Custom Enforcement, Office of Special Investigations, an Eastern European operations and intelligence expert about legacy high-value banking instruments, who told this anchor desk in a conversation it was his considered opinion from watching all of what is being transmitted on the internet and radio and television, there is a semantical operation in the field by America's clandestine services to propagandize people back into preferring the socialist major media over the fear pornography, undisciplined and subjective alternative journalism born on the internet, most prominently represented by Alex Jones, which aims to put the public en masse back to sleep. This anchor desk finds it interesting that Mr. Collin may indeed be right, but the quote-unquote taint is everywhere. It's conspicuous that Koppel and Rather has been featured on Coast to Coast AM within the last 3 months. Ladies and gentlemen, the American and British audiences have been numbed to the effects of a constant stream of stories about death, war, natural disasters, political, government, and private enterprise corruption, with no expectation of any remedy to redress these perfidies and injustices perpetrated by officials at every level of public service upon their respective populations cultures. In the view of this anchor desk, this is no accident. However, it is a constant barrage of cultural shocks to the body politics in every nation en masse to keep them off balance and confused. Also, to make them ambivalent to anything in the news. Accusations in America and Britain in the journalism channels by the journalists themselves of racism, sexism, and the ongoing publication of the minority transsexual community's travails, effectively using governmental coercion of forced equal treatment imposed upon the private sector, which is concurrently tearing at the Western culture's underbelly, keeping the populations polarized and arguing with each other. This culture rot, pro and con, on the streets in the form of seemingly spontaneous protests or social media comment arguments on the internet. We find a public obviously dismayed with what they're being given as news. And celebrities of all stripes and colors are joining in the shouting match as if they're pillars of integrity. With all this as a backdrop, ladies and gentlemen, we submit the following report. The most conspicuous news blackout we've seen of vital interest to the population on America's West Coast has been the ongoing nuclear disaster, which is Fukushima. Or, if to pronounce it the other way, Fukushima. The reports that the leak has been fixed, in our view, is a total fabrication. There is still millions of gallons of radioactive wastewater being spilled from the plant ongoing into the Pacific Ocean. Folks along America's West Coast are bid by this anchor desk to keep a supply of potassium iodide on hand to protect against thyroid cancer and to take the recommended daily dosage. However, potassium iodide has no effect on other organs or parts of the human anatomy. The most important fact in all of the conflicting reports we were able to ferret out by what's available on the internet is the fact there are reported spikes in cases of hyperthyroidism and thyroid cancer both around the Japanese prefectures surrounding Fukushima and along the West Coast in the states of California, Oregon, and Washington State. The official number cannot be estimated by our news company, and we don't have the resources necessary to compose this statistic. We rely on what we glean from what's available on the internet, and we speculate at this point. There's no question thousands of cases of these medical emergencies is an understatement in terms of hyperthyroidism in babies and young children and a rise in thyroid cancer in adults. Related to this are reports by oceanographic scientists of a superheated water mass which continues traveling eastward from Japan and roiling as a giant massive eddy over the last 5 years off America's west coast. This has produced some heavy speculation that indeed the ongoing drought in California could be attributed to this mass of water that some oceanographers referred to as the blob. This is how it appears in the water temperature plots by the use of color modeling computer software. However, one of the most heavily viewed pictures on the internet and bandied about by the alternative journalism sites is not, in fact, the color model of a factual account regarding water temperature or nuclear seepage. It was a color plot created by NOAA immediately after the Tohoku earthquake under the ocean in March 2011, showing the wave of height of the tsunami that followed. It has nothing to do with radioactive seepage from the reactor. There are many reports of distressed sea lion populations wherein local authorities along the southern California coast has had to intervene by putting floating platforms in many harbors to give the creatures refuge, but that didn't stop a massive baby sea lion population of 10,000 found dead on one of their California breeding ground islands and thousands more washing up on the beaches. This was reported last year. NOAA reports this is a result of sardine populations upon which the animals feed to be in massive decline. Other reports come from witnesses reporting to major journalism corporations out there, but no speculation or links to Fukushima has been cited. These reports came in last year and continue to come in. News reports in 2016 about mass die-offs are available, citing 10,000 dead squids on the coast of Chile. A pod of 45 dead whales off the coast of Tamil Nadu, India. Thousands of dead seabirds washing up along the coast of Prince William Sound in Africa. Correction edit, ladies and gentlemen, that is Prince William Sound in Alaska. No official findings about any of these reports linking this to radioactive wastewater from Fukushima. Reports of massive fish and crustacean populations being found dead on the Pacific Ocean floor are also found on many sites on the internet. This anchor desk cannot confirm or deny these sources as credible, but certainly the sea lions being found dead last year along California's beaches and breeding ground islands would indicate there might be some truth to some of this reporting activity. Public officials in America cite there is no immediate lasting effect to the West Coast populations from radioactive cesium in the ocean washing up on the shores of California, Oregon, and Washington state. These various officials cite there is a delusional effect of the Pacific Ocean upon the radioactive particles in the salt water as the buffer, even though they've reportedly raised the limits of exposure to higher levels of acceptability. Or to state it differently, higher levels of limits of exposure as being acceptable. Other sites on the internet allege a conspiracy by the oil and natural gas lobbies in Washington, D.C. as being behind the radiation reports. These sites allege that these lobbies are doing it because they want to build natural gas-powered electrical plants as a replacement for the nuclear plants currently in operation, which range in ages between 30 and 40 years in some cases. Two plants, the plants in question use the Mark I reactor built by General Electric which is the same design used in Japan and operated by TEPCO at Fukushima. There are 23 of these reactors in use in 13 states in America. According to Arnold Gunderson, a former executive nuclear engineer and scientist, a 44-year veteran in America's nuclear energy sector, states that the design flaws of this reactor was known as far back as the mid-70s. In a video report on his website, Mr. Gunderson explains the design flaws with the Mark I reactor. At the end of the said report, Mr. Gunderson appears to be making a pitch for renewable, clean, and sustainable energy as a counterbalance to the infamous climate change debate, thereby showing Mr. Gunderson's particular bias and revealing he may be a propagandist for the carbon tax crowd at the United Nations. So it is on the internet that there isn't a blackout of information about Fukushima, but there is a credible fact that conflicting information appears from as many sources as one could possibly imagine. Any intrepid researcher on the matter, no doubt, will find the same thing in the search strings as we did, no matter how you compose those search strings. Is Fukushima still dangerous? This anchor desk would assert that governments lie quite regularly, and everybody knows it. Therefore, if government officials say Fukushima is not a disaster endangering the public, it's safer to assume the opposite and make preparations in that event. If they say it's no larger than Chernobyl or 3 Mile Island, it would be safer to assume, in fact, it probably is much larger than either of those two tragic events. And that's the opinion of this anchor desk. Again, this is Scott Pollack, Chief Editor of the Critical Post Chicago, reporting. Thanks again for watching another Goldwater Report. We'll be back as soon as possible. That is all.